I have 6 years of data, and
Mm.
72% of the people that have reached out to me, of the tens of thousands of people, who in their initial conversation said, we're like 12 to 18 months out. That's the box they ticked. They were under contract in 3.2 months. The reason for that is, so I guess the caveat to the statement that you said, I wouldn't say 70% of renters could buy a home. I would say
Okay.
72% of the people who reached out to me,
To
in
you.
other words, people that were thinking about it, could have done it earlier.
Welcome to the Bricks and Banks podcast, where real estate meets real wealth. Whether you're building from the ground up or stacking your paper to the ceiling, Steph breaks down property power plays and money moves you can act on. From first-time buyers to seasoned investors, this podcast is your blueprint for financial freedom through property, investment, and business. Subscribe now. It's time to build your future. This is Bricks and Banks with Steph.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another amazing edition of Bricks and Bank with Steph. I have an amazing guest today, David Sidoni. Who is David Sidoni, you might ask? Well, I'll leave that for him to explain who he really is. But off the top of my head, he's the host of How to Buy a Home. He's a realtor and CEO and co-founder. So join me, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome David Sidoni to the platform.
Thank you so much. Very excited to be here.
Hey, David, how are you? How's it going over there? I know you're in the US.
Yep, in the
How's
U.S.
the weather?
So
The
we're
springtime.
we're currently right now just holding our breath to see what happens to the U.S. stock market.
Yeah, like everything has just been. I've stopped going to my investments because I'm like, I'm not about to have a heart attack. I know the market is gonna come back strong later on, but for now, we're just going through it and let us just keep going through it, in it. But the good thing
Exactly.
is that despite whatever is going on with the stock market, real estate still stands strong because our rents hasn't changed. I'm still gonna pay the same rent next month, so that's why real estate has always been and will always be the best investment. That's why we're here on this podcast. So let's get into the session proper. So, David, I'll just let you introduce yourself and share a bit of what makes you tick, what's your passion, and how did you come about How to Buy a Home podcast? What problem are you trying to solve?
Well, the thing for me is this is really that passion project. I
Hmm,
get so excited. I'm an old dude now. I'm
don't say that.
55.
Yeah.
But when I was, I get so excited hearing entrepreneurs and
Hmm,
hearing people realize I don't have to have the corporate job and be under the fluorescent lights. I can figure out how to do something, whether, any kind of service or e-commerce. When you create your own business these days, you're not just building a brick and mortar. So people can follow their passions earlier, and that's so exciting. For me, I actually got all the education and training and actual industry comprehension. And at
hmm.
49 years old is when I started this passion project. And the goal is
Wow.
to educate and empower first-time home buyers. I basically woke up one day we started in 2019, but it was 2018 when my wife looked at me and said, "You're only happy when you work with the people from Disneyland,"
Yeah.
because I helped people buy and sell homes from Disneyland because I worked there in high school and college.
Nice. Okay.
And I did that for years. Most of those people were first time home buyers. Most of those people were trying to buy in a very unaffordable market, which is what many of the global markets are right now. Most of those people were not getting the answers that they needed and were not getting the type of service that you should get when you're purchasing something for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it started as a passion education project. The public responded, and here we are 6 years later, and now it's a full-blown
Awesome.
company to help as many people as I can.
So you're saying you basically started off as a podcast, or you were just doing this on your spare time, then you decided to push the project through podcast?
The
Yeah.
podcast was an afterthought.
Okay. Well, it makes sense because you're already doing it.
Yeah, I had my real estate Southern California team, and I was
Uh,
doing social media, and I thought to help first time home buyers, I could do a YouTube channel. And I thought for sure that was going to be it. And then I kept listening to other marketers and people who were involved in social media and educating people on that, and they kept saying, podcasts are a good thing to do too. So I was like, I'll try it. Oops, now it's my whole business.
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, that's similar for me because sometime last year, I knew I'd always wanted to get into property, but I didn't know when. So sometime last year, I got a bit of time and I came across this training on real estate in the UK market specifically. And I'm like, okay, let me try it and see. And it was a 4 month intensive course, which led me to find out a whole lot of strategies. You have your BRR, buy to let, shared ownership, commercial real estate, so different ones. And I was like, okay, so real estate is not just renting out stuff. It's a whole market into it. There's the deals part of it where you just provide deals to customers and you get paid from once the deal goes through. And I'm like, okay, and I don't have to be a full-time realtor to do it. I can do it on the side with my job. So I'm like, okay, this year I know that I do not have all the knowledge, so to speak, because I mean, I'm just getting started. But I have everyone around me, people like you that have been in this industry for so many years. It's okay. I'm going to launch a podcast to have you guys come and talk about how much work you're doing because it's good to hear from great minds. And also, the platform would open me up to not just the UK market, but the US market. So I'm having guests from Europe, I'm having guests from the US, I'm having guests from the Philippines come on the podcast. So yeah, podcasts, we're on the winning team. It's working. Like it makes a lot of sense. We get to share ideas together, build relationships. So yeah.
Yeah, it's been really fun for me because as I explored other podcasts when I was starting,
Hmm.
what I do is very specific. It's a very specific niche. And
Okay. Yeah.
I'm learning that's actually a good thing in the podcasting world. If your podcast is so
Definitely.
broad, sometimes
Yeah.
it's hard to really capture an audience. And I don't need millions. I just need, to help the people who need the help.
The people that need it. Exactly.
And then what was neat was I found other people doing the same thing in other countries. I had an Australian two ladies come on my show because they had
Oh,
something specifically for first time buyers. So it's neat. There's a lot of people out there using this medium to answer questions that people need a little bit more than Google.
exactly. And I mean, it's really amazing right now because there's so much of this information and resources out there. Take a look at your website, how to buy a home website, the podcast. If someone just goes there, sees a lot of information for first time buyers, and it's very informative and it's useful because many people don't know how to start. I moved into a new country. I'm like, okay, I need to get into property, but I don't know how to do it. So such podcasts like this are what craved my indulgence and I went on to personal training and here I am. So okay. So you've been in real estate for since 2006. What made you shift from the traditional agent model to becoming a disruptor for first-time home buyers? Essentially, what's the appeal for you to just be in this targeted niche market of first-time buyers?
My Italian temper, I got angry. I sat here and I worked in an industry, and as I got higher and higher in the industry and I went to bigger and bigger conferences and meetings and masterminds, I realized the whole thing was basically corrupt, and
Yeah,
I hated that.
more or less.
I was very upset, and I come from the place that, back in the dinosaur days before the internet, if you were a good mom and pop store, you needed to be in the yellow pages or you needed to have some sort of branding and marketing so the public knew about you. But the best way was that the customers felt like they were taken care of and talked to other people. And
Okay.
in real estate, they don't do that. It's a numbers game. You're in and you're out and you're done. And the big companies run their businesses that way and their factories. And the reason why I started this was because where I am, first time home, when I started doing it, it was when I was helping people, it was like three or $400,000. Now it's seven or $800,000.
Wow.
That's a lot of money for people to get
Yes.
really crappy service. So I wanted to change it.
Okay. So are you just focused on the US market or are you global?
I know what I know, but I sure am aware what I don't know. The only thing where I understand the legalities are North America.
Hmm.
Canada and
Fair
the
enough.
US. Anything, south of Texas and into Mexico and anything in Europe, there are individual laws. We have individual
Yeah.
laws per state here,
Yeah, exactly.
but the entire process is different all over the globe. Now, again, I did talk to these people in Australia about the general. They called me and said, wait a minute, we don't have agents who represent buyers specifically. That's not part of what we do. But they called me when we had a lawsuit in the US because they were trying to figure out what they were going to do in Australia. So,
Oh,
all in all, customer representation for real estate is different all over the world. And what I really focus on is what's going on in the US and mostly how you can take advantage of it right now. And that's what everybody should be doing because the laws always change.
yeah. So has it changed significantly since Trump came in, or is still pretty much the same? What would you say?
No, yes, it has changed. No, it was not due to the political administration.
Mm,
We had a big lawsuit that happened in the summer of 2024, and it changed some things. The lawsuit was frivolous, ridiculous, and a complete scam, but it exposed that the real estate industry had some holes that made the consumer feel like they weren't being treated fairly. So it's changed now. There's more transparency. And then with each administration, all we're trying to do is figure out what's going to happen with the economy. And the funny thing is, as a guy who's an advocate for a first time home buyer, I've got the only audience that is cheering every time something goes wrong because they want prices to go down.
down, exactly. So you said that 70% of renters could own a home in 4 months with the right guidance. That's a bold claim. Can you break down that? Can you break it down for us?
Yes, my lawyer would kill me for this, but this
Okay.
is this is the claim.
Okay.
I have 6 years of data, and
Mm,
72% of the people that have reached out to me, of the tens of thousands of people, who in their initial conversation said, "We're like 12 to 18 months out." That's the box they ticked. They were under contract in 3.2 months. The reason for that is, so I guess the caveat to the statement that you said, I wouldn't say 70% of renters could buy a home. I would
okay.
say 72% of the people who reached out to me,
So you
in other words, people that were thinking about it, could have done it earlier, but they didn't because the industry ignores them and they don't find the education and they don't find the people to help them. So that's why I started the podcast. I ended up giving the keys to so many people and they were like, dang, Sidoni, I should have done this a year ago. Once they got figured out the process. But the thing is, when you reach out to a lender or a realtor and you say, I'm a year away, they ignore
yeah.
you.
Oh,
So,
I see.
they're like, great, save money and call me in 6 months because they don't get paid until it closes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's the gap that I'm trying to fill. But yeah, I've got the data. I'll stand by that. The people who reach out to me, not because I'm anything genius. I'm just saying y'all need to start this sooner.
I mean, I think I had a similar pushback. That was early January of 2024. I reached out to I saw a property and I was like, oh, this looks good. I was just trying to make inquiries. And the real estate agent was like, he thinks I still need to sit back and save up money so I can put down payments and whatnot. I'm like, okay, I didn't know it was that strict. Well, I know the laws in the UK are quite different, and Europe in general are quite different from what's obtainable in the US. So your last lease ever program has helped thousands of people escape the rent trap. So what's the secret sauce that make it so effective in today's market?
Well, you set it up right now. Your example. Did they tell you how much you needed to save up? Did they tell you which down payment options you could do?
No, they're just like, oh, you would need like a typical 10%, but that 10%, they don't tell you the hidden costs because when I got into the real estate program, I got to understand that there are also, yeah, aside the down payment, there are other hidden costs for like a solicitor, for like stamp duties, and that's pretty much what is obtainable in the UK. So they didn't break it down for me, and they were like, oh, you just need to go and raise the down payment for it first. So,
Yes. And they do that because they don't get paid until you close. I used to go to real estate seminars that were talking to realtors where they would say, so here's the timeline of your clients. Your A clients are 30 days, your B clients are 60 days. And if they're 90 days, they're a C client, like, see you later. And they
see
would
you
tell you
later.
to go tell them to save money and come back.
Hmm.
So what the Last Lease Ever program does is, here in the States, there are three things that matter. There's your down payment, of which we include what we call the closing costs. That's all those extra fees that you were talking about.
Okay.
So if you have to put, we have programs where you can do 3% and 5% down as a down payment,
Wow.
but we don't make 5% your goal. We make 8% your goal, because the average
Yeah.
closing cost is around 3%. So when they said to you, it's 10% down, they should have said it's 13, 14, 15% total, depending on all
Exactly.
those fees that you have.
Yeah.
But then they also should go, okay, great, but there is this assistance program. There's something here where you might be able to get some money from the seller. There's something here where there might be a lower down payment option here. Here in the States, are you a part of the military? If you are, you can do a 0 down payment. All of these
Yeah.
things are available and out there, but that discussion needs to happen at the beginning. Now, it doesn't mean that
Hmm.
you and I, as a lender and a realtor, are going to talk every week, but we're going to set up, where are you now? Where's your starting line? And then
Hmm.
give you goals. And your
Okay.
goal might be, this month I want to save $100. And then I text you at the end of the month and go, cool, now you're at 4%, and our target is 8% of the purchase price. So let's go from there.
Yeah, it makes sense because I have a friend in the U.S. Army, and he was telling me that for those in the army, they don't need a down payment, and I was like, oh, okay, that's quite favorable for you. So do you guys have a lot of customers in that from the army, or
So
not
remember when I
necessarily?
said that 72% of the people
Sounds
thought they
yeah.
were a year out? A lot of the military people are do not understand the power that they have. So
Mm,
it's taking me some time to educate and break through and let them understand. And think about it. If you're someone who you're 2 years in one state and 2 years in another state and 2 years in another state, you're like, I'm not going to stay. Why am I going to buy a house? But now
true.
you take the information that you got in that seminar. Imagine if they bought something at the first place and then rented it.
I rented
And then,
it.
if
Exactly.
they could be 28 years old, 10 years in, and own 3 or 4 properties and be set for life.
And all investment. Yeah, exactly. Makes a lot of sense. Like you said, information is key. And if they're not coming to you to request for this information, we never know. So thankfully, we have this podcast to educate our audience, and thankfully, hopefully, they will take action.
Well,
Yeah,
it's funny. You can do it for your own personal things, but me listening to podcasts like yours is how I figured out how to build a business that could fulfill my passion. I think
yeah,
it's crazy right now. It's wonderful that people still have workshops and seminars, but I don't think the average person realizes, by listening to your podcast with all the guests that you bring in, you could be getting 3 college educations at one time. One while
true.
you wash the dishes, one while you walk the dog, and the other one while you drive to work.
Yeah, and it's not just, we're not just talking, we're actually providing practical action steps people can take to make their dream come true. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants a side income. So why don't you start the investment property?
And that's where the first-time homebuyer thing really comes in for me. As
Mhm.
rent has gotten higher, no matter where
Yeah,
you are on the globe, when people talk about investing, it's always what you have extra after
yeah,
you've paid all of your monthly bills. Well, think about a home. I call it a rent replacement strategy.
yeah.
You know, you're spending all your time trying to save money to figure out how to buy your next property. Well, if you're spending $1,000 a month at the end of the year, that's $24,000 that went to a landlord as opposed to your own personal investment.
Yeah, that's true. And I know you would have come across a lot of people who would have been like, oh, I wish I'd known this sooner, especially in their journeys to first time ownership. What would you say is one story that really stuck with you, that struck you at the core and be like, oh, I'm actually making impact and I'm grateful I'm doing this service to people?
Let's see. There was one of the things I do on the podcast is I interview as many people as I can.
Mm,
who went through the process and bought a home. So, yeah, there's been a couple where I've cried, where people tell me that they're the first person in their entire family ever to own a
mm,
home, where people tell me that they were homeless a few years ago and they
mm.
were renting and they didn't think they could buy. Um, there are people that tell me that they got a good job, they were doing what they're supposed to do, their parents rented, their grandparents rented, and they just thought, well, I'm going to
It's
live paycheck to paycheck my whole life. And so, I've had people that have gone through other programs for
mm,
2 or 3 years and they followed that program. And then they find me, and in 2 months, credit scores are really important in the United States. Their credit
yeah.
score goes up 150 points. And they've been working on this other program for 3 years and it hadn't moved. So it's as much as those are there are really big, great, impactful stories like that, but there are also the people that just call me that kind of remind me of myself when I was like 33, 34 years old, and they're like, dude, I am paying $4,000 a month to live in Boston because it's expensive, but I like where I live and my job's here. Like, I've got to be able to buy a house, but it doesn't feel like I can. And then being able to help them see all of those options,
Mm,
that's an exciting part of my job.
that's amazing. I mean, you pride yourself as being like the local trusted realtor. So do you specifically cater to a certain um tax bracket of audience, or you're open to everyone, or do you just
We treat everyone like they're a $10 million client, even if it's for $100,000, because the education that we give
Mm,
truly is for everybody. A lot of the times in real estate, if you are a first time home buyer, you don't get the attention that you should
yeah.
because you're the lowest commission for that real estate agent. And so what I've done is created a system so that me and my team of agents all over the country, and I shouldn't say team, they're just partners. They're people I know who are awesome in their cities.
Wow.
And when I refer them to those people, because we have systems in place, we can make them feel like it's that client that we're driving around for a $10 million property and bending over backwards for, because with the systems, they know they're being taken care of. They know they always have someone they can reach out to. So in general, it's everybody. We have had 18-year-olds that have called us and just
Wow.
really wanted to buy a home, and they bought a home when they were 19. And
Wow.
we've had 59-year-olds call us.
That's
So,
impressive.
most of the time we're looking at that 30, late 20s, 30 something person. But it's getting exciting because we're getting a lot more younger people now because they realize they don't want to rent for their whole 20s.
Yeah, because it's crazy. You're buying, you get your paycheck and half of it goes to rents. 25% left goes to bills, and you're just left with barely 75% to hold on to and catch your breath till the next paycheck. It's ridiculous, to be honest. So I like the fact that a lot of people are waking up, and it's because of platforms like yours and mine that's spreading the word out to let people know that, see, we don't have to do things like they've always been done. We can flip the switch and get into this mix as soon as possible. Yeah, that's great. I know, going back to the credits score thingy, because like a lot of people, you need like a credit score to get mortgage and whatnot. So a lot of people are still stuck in that mindset that they need the perfect credit score, a 20% down payment, or a six-figure income to buy a home. So how do you break these fears down when you speak to your clients and people? How do you help them change their mindset on these limiting factors?
Yeah, the thing now is I have stories,
Hmm.
and the I can tell you right now, I did an episode on what we call a hard credit pull.
Okay.
When a lender does a full check of your credit, then it's called an inquiry to the credit bureaus, the people who create your scores. A
Hmm.
credit inquiry is technically a negative of a couple points, and it stays on your score for a little bit and then it goes away. That's so that people are just constantly can't be calling different people trying to get all different kinds of loans because that would be irresponsible credit behavior. Well, the people who refuse to do anything and start looking at their full credit are the people with the highest credit scores. And that little inquiry of 2 points would do absolutely nothing to their
Okay.
credit score. So the the responsible people are the
Yeah.
people who wait the longest
Long.
to reach out to somebody. And that's I heard a stat, it changes all the time, but 38 to 44% of people who rent in the United States think you need a 20% down payment, where the average first time home buyer is putting 7 to 8% as a down payment. But yet, still, that many people think it because they don't do the research. They just hear something once and they
Mm.
stick their head in the sand and say, I'll do it later.
Yeah, it's just crazy how, especially when, when it comes to property, people just have this mindset that, oh, it's expensive, it's for the big guys. So once you hear property, or you can start now, like, oh, I don't have 20K in my account to spare. So let me save up. And once I have 20K in my account, I can start. But you don't necessarily need that much. So on average, how would you quantify, like, in terms of real cash, that people would necessarily need to start? I know it would vary depending on the type of property and whatnot, but let's just go for a crazy average right now.
Well, the purchase price is going to affect most of that. So if we look at a $400,000 purchase price, was about
Hmm,
the average in the United States right now.
hmm,
We've had clients that have purchased a $400,000 home using down payment assistance programs, using seller credits where the seller will actually give you a credit as part of the transaction. We've had people complete the whole transaction for $5,000.
Wow.
Um, and we've interviewed them and had them on the show. Obviously, I don't sell that as we can do that for everybody.
Yeah,
But if I was looking at a $400,000 house, I would say you need, if you're looking at 5% down, there's your 20,000, and then you want
30K.
to put another 3% on that for the closing costs.
Hmm,
So let's say you need $35,000 to do that. And then we look at the mortgage payment versus your rent payment. Maybe it's another $500 more right now. Well, right there, a lot of people are going to go, I don't have $35,000 and 500 more a
sure.
month doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
What they forget is that they're already paying that huge portion. And so that's why we talk about a rent replacement strategy. And if you talk to a lender, that 8% of that 400,000, that's
Hmm,
my conservative number. You could be getting a 3% down payment. You could be getting a
wow.
down payment where you're getting assistance, maybe a five or a $10,000 grant. And those are different, not just state to state, but
Hmm,
city to city in the US. Certain cities will have certain amount of money that they're going to allocate for first-time homebuyers. So I tell people, what's the worst that happens? If right now you're sitting here and you think, I don't have $35,000. Okay, but your rent's going to keep going up. So how about
exactly.
we make a plan today? And now you've got $10,000. And now we know, okay, if I can save $500 a month, this is how many months it's going to take me before I get that. In the meantime, while you're doing that and working with a team, prices might change, interest rates might change, or there could be a program that you could get a lower down payment. But if that happens and you don't have a team in place, now you're scrambling. Whereas if you're working with someone kind of developing it together, then you're ready to adapt to whatever happens in the housing market.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense because you just need to start in it. You just need to take that first step and walk through things through, because most times when people hear, okay, I don't have 35K, I'll start when I'm 40 and I'm ready to retire. But no, you can actually walk towards it, like you've rightly said. You can save up towards it. You can uncover some grant scheme or assistance program that would help you lower your down payment. It's just about asking. I remember when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he
Yep.
said, how can I, don't ever say you can't afford it. Think of how can you afford it. So it sets your mind up for various possibilities, and the possibilities are endless, especially in the property world. There are so many strategies. And coming to that, because I know you're helping first-time buyers get their own places, but how do you maintain your vision? Because the property market, like we said, has different strategies. And today you might be feeling like, "Oh, I'm helping first-time buyers secure their properties." Tomorrow, commercial real estate looks attractive. So how do you stay true to your vision without dilly-dallying and whatnot? Yeah.
I ran the numbers before I started this,
Hmm.
and I realized that I could have a passion project that if I just built to scale my business behind it, I
Yeah.
wouldn't ever have to chase the almighty dollar for anything else. The business is built so that I knew right away that every year in the US, 33% of every transaction that happens is a first-time home buyer. And
Hmm.
in working in the industry, it's almost 20 years in now, but I was 13 years in when I started, 12 years in when I started the podcast. I knew that those 33% were being wildly ignored. So for me, I know I have massive amounts of growth in the space of first-time home buyers. So I am sure every week there's going to be something that I could make more money and be better. But right now, as I grow this, I get the credibility that I'm the person who's always been there to help them. Look, last year was the worst year for first-time home buyers in the history of the US. If I didn't change what I was doing last year, then
Hmm.
I'm in this
Nothing.
for good.
You're in it for the long haul. Yeah. So, can you just like share a bit of your background? Like, what was your life growing up? When did you get your first home? How would you advise people, first-time buyers, would you advise them to go through the investment property route, or would you actually tell them to get a place for themselves first, do investment property later? What would be your advice? I know it's a bunch of questions in one, but
Oh, but it's great because they all kind of go together.
yeah.
So in my teens, I was a performer. I was an actor in TV and film and stuff like that.
Wow.
And as I started to figure out that I wanted to have a more settled down life, not live the Hollywood lifestyle,
Hmm.
I started doing real estate investing. And then I realized that the job I could have when I was settling down with my wife was being an actual real estate agent and helping residential people as opposed to, full time the investing side.
Hmm.
So I transitioned into that. As I grew, all this passion and insider information that I was gaining and that I now talk about on the podcast all the time. Well, here's the big revelation. My dummy me, sorry, I was going to call myself a dirty word. My stupid headness rented when I was on TV and had television shows in
Uh,
my 20s, and I spent $104,000 in rent, and I could have for $5,000 down had a condo that was nicer than all the apartments I rented for $104,000, which, by the way, in today's dollars is like $240,000 I spent on rent. And the only thing I
wow.
got at 28 years old was a $1,500 security deposit back to me, where I could, yeah, because I rented the whole time because I
Yeah.
didn't buy. So
Hmm.
hindsight is a beautiful thing. That's why this old guy on a microphone might be cringy, but I'm telling you, don't make the mistakes that I made. And so from there, as I moved, oh, now I see, I knew I could do it, but I don't remember the second part of the question. What did I do with my life?
Yeah,
And
so
then
and what's your advice for people? Because most times
invest.
first-time buyers
Yeah,
would
yeah.
want to do get for themselves as opposed to investment property. But you get some
Okay.
advice from people saying, "Oh, do investment property first." So,
So this advice comes from me listening to a whole lot of people.
hmm,
90% or more of the people that come to me to buy an investment property first, the people who come to me, the reason they want to do it is because it's getting unaffordable for them, but they really want to get in the game.
Hmm.
And for them, I say absolutely not. I say I understand where you're coming from. Now, I get it. There are two schools of thought for everything in real estate. There are really smart people that say always have as big a mortgage as you can, and there are other people that say never have a mortgage, pay off your house as fast as you can. Mathematically, both of those work. What the real answer is, who are you and what is your investment style? What are
Hmm.
your financial particulars, the way you handle yourselves? The thing I think that I've seen way too many people make a mistake is they want to get into property because they saw something on Instagram or they read one book. They might be able to get something cheap and run it as an investment property and maybe make a couple $100 a month positive cash flow. But in the meantime, they spend so much time working on that. They don't work on their own particular home. Next thing you know, it's 3 or 4 years later, and they've spent $30,000 or $40,000 a year in rent. So
Hmm.
the bigger piece that I tell people is, if you think you're going to own one or two investment properties, then get your own home first and then use that home as leverage.
Hmm.
Now, if you think you're going to buy 10 or 15 and that's what you're going to do, sure, there are mathematical formulas where staying a renter might make more sense to you because you have more available liquid cash to go out and
Yeah.
purchase other homes because you don't have to use it for a down payment. But that's very short-term math, because once you go past 3 years or 4 years, you've been paying rent that potentially you could have been paying into a mortgage, and that
Okay.
mortgage plus the equity, the mortgage reduction plus the equity means that you could now be drawing on the home. And
True.
so it's not, but that gets really into the weeds of investing. If you understand the mindset of, if I have to save enough capital to purchase each individual home, because there are full investment strategies that's what you do with your first investment property. You buy your first investment property, and then
Hmm.
eventually you draw from that to buy your next one and your next one. So you never have to raise the capital. What they forget to tell you is that that first property, it takes time to get enough equity to be able to pull from it.
Yeah.
And for you, any time that you have, you're going to be sitting there paying a rent that's going to continue to go up. So it takes a little bit of guidance and knowledge from someone who knows all the full numbers. But I can tell you, if you haven't run the full numbers, there's probably a scenario where using your first primary residence to avoid paying rent that goes to nothing in your portfolio, it might take a little longer for you to get your first investment property, but drawing from your own property that you own versus drawing from your own investment property while you're still paying rent to somebody else, in the long run, that can be a reduction of your capital.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense because, yeah, the thing is, like you rightly said, do what works for you, but it makes better sense for you to have your own before you now go into the market, because by the time because more often than not, it's not guaranteed that the cash flow from the investment property is going to cover your rent anyway. So
Correct.
just
But I mean, if
take
you're
the
living
first
at
step,
home in
investing.
your mom's basement, that's different math,
Yeah, yeah, okay, that makes
you
sense.
know?
Yeah, if you're living for free, then you can do the investment property route. But if you're paying rent, it's just get yours first, then get into the market. So along that line of thought, so would you advise for people to go full equity on or shared ownership when starting out like an investment property? What's your
I
advice?
hear so many things about this, and all I hear in the back of my head is lawyers, lawyers, lawyers,
Yeah,
solicitors, solicitors,
human
solicitors.
factor, because everyone's gonna have issues in it.
I've had people I had some friends in Los Angeles that were very, very busy. They were talent agents. They
Hmm.
worked 16 hours a day, or they worked 12 hours a day, and then they always had evening dinners and lunches and things like that. And they just said, you know what? We should buy a house together. And so two or three of them thought about buying a house together, and they were all single and they all wanted a family. And I was like, how is that going to work when one of you just, is in a relationship and is ready to move on? A property is something that eventually is a stepping stone for many people. So, as much as I think co-ownership can be something that can help people start investing,
Hmm.
I would here in the United States, we have something called an ADU right now, which is an accessory dwelling unit, which is basically splitting a unit up so that it can be multiple streams of renting, whether it's
Okay.
converting a garage or adding a back entrance to the back bedroom so that they can be separated. So I would look to find multiple streams on a property first.
Hmm.
But you know what? If that's what it takes, we had these things called ticks in the United States before the crash. That was, it was kind of like GoFundMe investing,
Okay.
Kickstarter investing. That's the theory.
Hmm.
Everyone would put in $50,000 and they'd all buy a $10 million building building. Well, then the market crashed and the returns started going negative. So, everybody that's coming into it as a co-buyer, it's almost like they all need to be in the exact same financial situation to handle
Situation.
whatever happens. Otherwise,
True.
you're going to have multiple opinions on what to do when, not if, but when there needs to be a change in
Hmm.
whatever's happening with the property.
Yeah, true. Because even when people get married and get a property together and they divorce and they just have to sell off the whole thing because it's difficult to split the equity. It's just like a sticky situation. But I mean, it works for some people, so it just depends on the legalities around it at the end of the day. Okay. So from podcasting to building a national network of unicorn agents, you said you call them partners. What advice would you give someone trying to create a unique brand in a saturated industry such as real estate?
Advice to the buyer trying to find a unicorn, or advice to a real estate professional who wants to
Real
be a
estate
unicorn?
professional who wants to be a unicorn, who wants to get into the industry, seeing everyone around is a giant, everyone is doing
Yeah.
things differently.
Realize that 87% of the realtors in the United States quit in 5 years.
Hmm.
71% of realtors in the US did not sell one home last year. So, my advice, if you're going to do this
Hmm.
full time. Come in with your eyes wide open and realize that the industry and your big company sucks and doesn't give a crap about you and is not trying to train you. They are
Hmm.
on purpose not trying to train you because they want you to do 3 or 4 deals, because when you do 3 or 4 deals and you're new, you pay the broker 50%, the largest amount they can make. And then the broker wants you to quit so they can get somebody else in. Because if you stick around, you're paying the broker less, 40%, 30%, 20%. So the broker only makes money when these lousy
Yeah.
realtors who are undertrained keep turning over. And guess who gets absolutely destroyed in that particular setup? The consumers
So that's
who get the cut.
okay.
So my advice, know what you're getting into. It's kind of like
Hmm.
if you're in sports and you know that this team has a terrible coach and you got traded there, you're going to know what you're going to change the way that you behave. But if you didn't know he's terrible and you find out along the way,
Hmm.
then it's a lot harder.
Nice. Thank you so much. I mean, these are precious advice. So, just piggybacking on your experience so far, what would you say has been like your best and worst investment moments or business
Oh,
moments, so to speak?
yeah, my best investment moment
Yeah.
was the very first property, well, not very first, but one of the properties that I had, that when I realized that it had gone up $95,000 in 11 months and I
Wow.
could sell it, and that could be my salary for my first year in real estate. Because that's the thing they
Awesome.
don't tell you. When you become a real estate agent, you have to pay
Mm,
for everything
true.
and you're not making any money. So that was my best. My worst was taking my victories from 2002, 2003, 2004 and not realizing what a dummy I was and buying more in 2005 and 2006 and then the market crashed.
Oh.
Part of the reason why I did it, you know, why I continue to educate now.
Hmm.
It was real simple. I just was new to the game. Anyone who had been in the game for more than 5 years would have been like, "Y'all take a break. This is
Hmm.
not gonna work." When I had I knew someone who bought a $700,000 house, and they said how easy it was, and they told their gardener about it, and then their gardener bought the house next door. That's a problem.
So was it a similar circumstance when COVID hit? What was the real estate market like then in 2020?
COVID was so interesting because it
Yeah.
was literally 6 weeks, and then it was coming back.
Yeah.
I remember I'm actually just talking to the clients I helped, my very first COVID clients that I helped
Mm.
6 weeks in, where they were like, "All right, let's go." And, we went, and we didn't have gloves as part of our kits yet, so I remember I was wearing mittens because we were like, "We have to wear gloves to walk around this vacant home." People were lining up for open houses like it was in hazmat suits, you know? The COVID hit was artificially brought back up by monetary policies by our government, so
Mm.
it came back really fast.
Okay. Okay. So one last question. So if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about the real estate industry for first home buyers today, what would it be?
That's easy. There are 3 million real estate agents. I would eliminate 2,500,000
Why?
because they suck, because they part-time, because 71% of them didn't sell. Okay. The real estate industry makes money by having novice agents and doesn't tell the consumer this. The real estate
Mm.
industry, therefore, has the lowest bar of entry. The consumer thinks if I say I have a real estate license, that means something. And the consumer puts their trust in that person. And my
Mm.
15-year-old could pass the real estate license test. And the worst thing is, if she did, a broker would be like, awesome, let's go. Here, go on TikTok right now and get all your friends to buy houses. Well, but I don't know what to do, sir. What do I do? Oh, don't worry about it. Once they tell you they want to buy a house, we'll tell you how to do it. That's the way the industry works. And the consumer doesn't know that. So if I could wave my magic wand, poof, all those people that used to be
Oh,
whatever they
brokers.
used to be go back to their job.
That's very fun. Thinking about that, so what's like the best way of entry, especially for real estate real estate agents to market property? I know you mentioned TikTok. Are these effective ways, or one-to-one or referrals are still king?
There are people that make a whole lot of money selling 5 or 6 different systems. The one
Mm.
thing I've learned in marketing the podcast is that it changes constantly. Social media, what is actually working changes constantly. So, there are people that are going to be very intense, hardcore salespeople and just on the phone, on the phone, on the phone, researching
Mm.
data for people that maybe might want to sell their home but haven't said anything. And then there are people that do the referrals, like you said, what we call the sphere of influence. So I think the important thing is to realize what kind of business person are you? And then
Mm.
match your marketing to whatever kind of business person you are, because it's going to be a grind. So whatever you like or that you do well, that's going to be the easiest thing for you to scale. If it's working by referral, if it's having parties for your clients, if it's going out to lunches with people, that's great. If you're a great talker and they could be open houses, you can be sitting and talking to people when they come in. Or maybe you're a data spreadsheet person. Cool, then you can put together marketing pieces and do mailing pieces. And if you, like I
Mm.
said, if you're a salesperson, you can do calls. But the key is figure out what works best for you and then get a coach and have
Get a
somebody else
coach.
being accountable with you, a coach who
Mm.
specializes in whatever you want to do. Because if you just post on Instagram for 6 months and think this isn't working, well, how do you know?
Yeah, having a mentor is always key because if you don't have a mentor, you just keep making unnecessary mistakes. And someone like you, you've been there, you've done that, and that's why you're helping first time buyers snatch the game right under their feet. So thank you so much, David, for being on the pod today. I just want to move on to the next segment. It's just a brief segment, which is the firecracker question. So they're just random questions based off on all we've discussed so far, and you don't need to think so much, just hit me with your answer. So the first question, what's one thing a renter can do today to get one step closer to buying their first home right now?
Automate, automate, automate. Automate savings automatically. Automate, automate, automate.
Amazing. So, second question, what's the worst advice you keep hearing out there about buying a home, and what's the truth instead?
The market's going to crash. I need 20% down. I
Yeah.
can't buy a home because I have student loans. I know it's
Mm.
a firecracker, but you ever seen those machine guns with a million bullets? That's what I've got for this one.
Yeah, so what's the truth instead?
It's just there's so many myths.
Hmm.
I can't. My credit score is holding me back. I don't want to have my credit score pulled. You need to make six figures to buy a home. Yeah, I can't buy a home because I don't have the right type of job being reported to the taxes, to the IRS a certain way.
Yeah.
W-2 versus I can't buy a job because I'm self-employed.
Hmm.
Can't buy a job because I'm a teacher.
Sure.
So many myths.
Lastly, if a listener is taking home one thing from this session, what would you want it to be?
Google can only get you so far.
Hmm.
So find a professional team that can take you to the next level way earlier than you thought. I'm talking a year ahead of time.
And we already have the professional team. David and his team would help you get there in less than a year. So, David, how can we reach you? Because I know that after this episode, a lot of people will be flooding through. So, how can we reach you? I know you're on LinkedIn, you have
Yeah.
your website, you have your podcast. So, just let us
So
know how we can get through to you.
I'm all over the social medias, but the easiest way is just go to howtobuyahome.com and there's a button that says Ask David.
Amazing.
Just go to howtobuyahome.com and ask me.
Now, I'll put all the links to getting through to David on the site for everyone to get across. So thank you so much, David. It's been a pleasure listening to you. Thank you for sharing your life because life is valued in terms of time. You've shared your time with us, you've shared your experience, you've shared your wealth of knowledge, and you've given us action steps. You've helped us to cut back on the myths to investing in property first time. So thank you so much for being on the pod. It's great having you.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. And so that's the end of today's podcast. I hope you've learned a lot, and I'll see you on the next episode. Cheers.